I was just browsing Reddit and somebody had a question about whether social anxiety is something you're born with or whether it's something you develop. And I want to answer this question, hopefully, and share my experience because I believe my experience has elements that will probably be relevant for a lot of other people as well. I believe that social anxiety is a mixture of both a genetic predisposition as well as something you develop in your life due to circumstances around you. So let's get into that first one and talk about the genetic predisposition to developing something like social anxiety in your life. Research has shown that around 15 to 20% of the population is born highly sensitive. If you read the book by Elaine Aron called The Highly Sensitive Person, or you just go on Wikipedia, you can see that 15 to 20% of the population of humans are born highly sensitive. These highly sensitive people essentially have a nervous system that is more reactive and more affected by stimulus. So loud noises, caffeine, large crowds, anything that stimulates someone, basically it affects a highly sensitive person that much more. So this is what I believe plays a large role in social anxiety. Being a highly sensitive person means you are susceptible, more susceptible to the things that will cause social anxiety to blossom in your life. So that's why I believe that most people who struggle with social anxiety probably are a highly sensitive person. If you recognize any of these things in yourself, such as being sensitive to just any of these factors, loud noises, crowds, lots of people, being in the spotlight, all of these things can make a highly sensitive person's nervous system just react very strongly and activate. You'll feel all of these neurochemicals and biochemicals in your body just turning on, and some people call this a fight or flight response, but basically it's just a big activation in your body, and highly sensitive people will have more of that activation. So that explains one side of the equation, the nature side. What about the nurture side? What about the experiences in life that cause social anxiety to come into fruition? I believe that this plays a bigger role than the nurturing side or the nature side, which is your genetic predisposition. I'd say that being a highly sensitive person probably accounts for around 20 to 30% of the reason why you have social anxiety. The other 70 to 80% can be explained with your childhood and any trauma you experience during that period, as well as in adolescence. That's a time in adolescence when social anxiety usually starts to blossom and you start to see it in your life. Now, childhood is, I believe, if you look at social anxiety as a pyramid, with the base of the pyramid being the biggest factor and then everything else stacking up, slowly having less of an impact. At the base of the pyramid, I believe you have childhood. That is your relationship with your parents and how they raise you. I believe that ultimately plays the biggest role in why social anxiety might appear later in your life. So with your parenting and just how your parents raised you, this plays such a big role because you can think of your parents as essentially the blueprint, the foundation for all the relationships that you form later in life. They're basically the template. So how you interact with your parents is how you're going to go out into the world and interact with other people. So if there's a lot of fucked up shit in the relationship with your parents, that means that you're going to bring all this baggage into the relationships you have with other people. So just a few things that are big factors are really there's two big ones. They affect your sexual nature, and they affect your love and your heart and your intimacy, your ability to be intimate with people. Because a big part of social anxiety is you can't open up, you can't express yourself, you can't be intimate with people because you fear rejection so strongly, you don't feel stable in yourself. And I believe a big part of that is the relationship with your parents and how stable that was as far as the love you got and the nurturing and the care. Because your parents can do a number on you as far as how they interact with you, how they show you love. For example, if you got spanked as a child, you can imagine how much that would impact the psyche of that person. I know that my parents spanked me as a child, and I think the fact that both being highly sensitive and being spanked caused me a lot of emotional trauma. It really caused me to close off my heart because here were my two parents who were supposed to be my foundation and my complete support network for growing up. Like, as a child, you rely completely on your caretakers. And when they do something, when they spank you, it just sends such a powerful negative message. And it really imprints you on a deep, deep level. And I believe that's a huge reason. Just physical abuse, violence, emotional abuse, the withdrawal, I can't say that word, withdrawal of love. When they withdraw their love, that shows that just deeply impacts the psyche of that young child. So that's a huge reason. The heart, how open your heart is, how open you are to connecting with others. And then the other side is the sexual side. And many people who grow up in westernized cultures, I believe, are highly impacted by sexual repression. And a book that explains this very well is Fear by Alexander Lowen. He goes deeply into this topic. He calls it the Oedipal problem, where a situation gets created between the mother, father, and child, and it causes the child, if there's an Oedipal situation in the family, it causes the child to essentially become psychologically castrated, where that child can no longer comfortably feel like a sexual being. His sexuality essentially gets castrated, not physically, but psychologically. And this is what I believe contributes to a large part of the shame that's felt with social anxiety. You're cut off from your sexuality, from the bottom half of your body, and you have nothing to stand on. You're not a whole being, you're only half a being, and you exist from essentially the torso up, and you're not connected with your animal nature anymore. And when you're not connected with your full self, you feel shameful about yourself and who you are. And this is what I believe causes a lot of the problems with trying to connect with the opposite sex and be sexual. The Oedipal situation that is created by the mother and the father with the child. And I don't really want to go into detail about that. You can read Alexander Lowen's book called Fear if you really want to understand that. But I believe it's those two things, essentially, the love and the sexuality of the child growing up in that family situation. Basically, those two things really get affected, and as the child then goes into adolescence, that's when these problems really start to manifest and show themselves. They don't show themselves immediately in childhood. They start to appear later in adolescence when that person starts to form more of an ego, and he starts to go out into the world and become his own person. He finds that all his relationships with people are really affected. He can't express himself comfortably. He doesn't feel whole going into relationships with others, and he just feels so, I guess, diminished as a person. And that's really what contributes to a large part of the anxiety. You don't go into interactions with other people feeling like you're a whole person. You feel like you're somehow diminished, and you can't fully be yourself. And that's because of that initial relationship with your parents. And so you go into adolescence, and the blueprint with your parents becomes the foundation for all your relationships with others from then on out. And that's what creates a large part of the anxiety. And then, of course, other things in adolescence can also contribute to the anxiety you feel, such as isolation. If you isolate yourself and you don't get out there and you're not interacting with people, that obviously contributes a lot to the anxiety that you'll feel. If you're not practicing your social skills and you're not putting yourself out there, what happens is your nervous system, when you're a highly sensitive person, your nervous system will only become more sensitive if you're just spending all your time alone on the computer, playing video games, whatnot. The more time you spend alone and the less time you spend out there in the world, you're just going to become more and more sensitive, and it's going to become a bigger and bigger barrier to cross to get yourself out there and to start socializing and connecting with people. I have experience with that myself. I played a lot of video games in my teenage years, and I had the hardest time when I finally reached my breaking point. I had the hardest time getting out there and connecting with people. I was just so afraid and nervous, and I had so much anxiety coursing through my body that it was the hardest thing for me to get out there and meet people. So I'll wrap up the video by saying that it's that both things contribute to social anxiety. It's nature and nurture, definitely, with nurturing playing a bigger factor in the formation of that social anxiety. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully I cleared up some of that so you better understand your situation and what you're going through. Take care.